lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and with me today, I have one of the greatest living cartoonists to ever do it with me. I have Gilbert Hernandez of Love and Rockets. You need know nothing else but that. I mean, he's amazing. 40 years you guys are celebrating, so I'm super stoked to have you on here. Can't wait to talk some comics with you, man.
I'm happy to be here. I haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks, so we're good.
Awesome, man. So, I always ask everybody the first time I'm talking with them, and I kind of know a little bit about your exposure to your first exposure to comics was through your mom. But I'd love to hear, like, what were some of those comic books that she was sharing with you that you kind of that helped you discover the medium?
Well, at first, it was simply just my brother Mario's, 4 years older, so they would be at the store or something, and she'd see comic books and go, "Oh, I used to read these," and she would let him buy one, or she'd buy one for him. In those days, comics were a dime, so it wasn't a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go poor reading a comic book in those days. So anyway, he gravitated to a few things, and he liked it, and she would always talk about the comics she liked when she was a kid. So for example, like when Avengers #4 came out, it was reintroducing Captain America, who's has stayed, but he was gone for a few years, during the 50s, early 60s. But so she was like, "Oh, great, Captain America!" She would tell us about Captain America, but it was more of a mystery world. We didn't really know anything about it, and then somehow, I guess through fanzines and stuff, that we started to learn about those old characters that she would talk about. So there was this whole question of like, what are superheroes? What are, it's more than just Superman and, Spider-Man, it's just more. So anyway, that's what got us curious at first. And then we would just copy, from other comics, just, a Jack Kirby monster or something like that. Well, I'm talking very early 60s, so it's a little different than it is now. So anyway, that's kind of how it started. And so I guess it was genetic that we were drawn to the medium. Like we liked the way comics worked, And also when you're young and you get to see really good artists like Jack Kirby and people like that, you're hooked on that because he was so good, So it's not just a bunch. Even though I like a lot of trashy comics, probably like more trashy comics than serious ones, or classic ones. But it's just I love the medium, and I love the freedom. How if you really wanted to see something really wacky, really goofy, really crazy science fiction, aliens, whatever, you could see it in a comic book. Movies you have to deal with the budget. In a TV show, you got to, and your audience is a lot larger, so you have to kind of make it kind of connect in something familiar. Whereas comic books, like, forget it, just whatever they came up with. Remember, these are 50-year-old guys, writing for teenagers and little boys, so. It was funny. So the old comics from the late 50s and the entire 60s were just lunacy. I was like, what? But I loved them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, like, I started a YouTube channel, so comic books are my favorite medium. And like you said, like, the possibilities for comics are endless. It's as far as the imagination of the creator, the writer, the artist, or person's doing both, and like budgets are a factor in film. So it's like, yeah, you can only go so far, especially, and if your pockets aren't deep. But I just love the combination of words and pictures with comics. And I think that it's just a lot of magic happens between those pages, especially, from a young age all the way. And then, as tastes grow, like you said, like you started with some of those things, but you kind of like start getting into other stuff as you get older. And you mentioned Jack Kirby, obviously, like he's, legend. I mean, I don't need to talk about Jack Kirby. Everybody knows. If you don't know who Jack Kirby is, shame on you. Change that right now. But who are some of the other creators that you kind of like latched onto, from as you're growing up and you're getting more into the medium?
Well, it was, we grew up in the 60s, so we liked all kinds of comics. So I'll just start with, say, from Marvel, it was Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Gene Colan, people that were working, the better artists that were working. And of course, Stan Lee's scripts, they're funny and they were really good at the time. And then over at DC, I liked people like Wayne Boring and Kurt Schattenberger and Ramona Fradon, and people like that. Oh, Bruno Prumiani, who did the Doom Patrol. Yeah. Things like that. And then at the other companies, at Charlton, you'd have lesser guys, but they're still pretty good, like Pat Boyette and Jim Paro, guys like that. So you look at that stuff too, but you knew where the good stuff was, like Jack Kirby. It was like, no matter where he went, I followed. And so that reading that, and then later on, but see, like getting to the more adult comics, and I say adult with a cliche. I mean, with with quotations, because adult meaning underground.
Hmm.
How adult were they? You just couldn't read them under if you were under 18. Uh,
Right.
um, my older brother, buddy, we'd read Mad magazine, so it wasn't weird to read a black and white magazine. Like a lot of kids will look at black and white and won't even bother with it, but uh, we like Mad magazine a lot. And then we got gravitated to like a hot rod cartoons. There was a magazine called Drag Cartoons. There was cartoons and this and that. But the artists were pre-underground artists, so they're pretty good. They're very interesting. We just like the way the art was done. And then a little by little, and then we just older brother, we discovered underground comics, which were just insane. I was too
Hmm.
young to be looking at them. It was like, this is just crazy. But at the same time, I thought, well, this is crazy. This is not for me. But at the same time, I appreciated the freedom, and that
Yeah.
their minds, and it's their minds. See, it's not our minds; it's their minds. So it was a very personal thing, which I thought I caught on early. It was still alien to me because that these guys can get away with this like really crazy violence and sex. But it was all satire, so I got it kind of. Otherwise it was just like, oh, this is naughty. But I appreciated that it could be more than just Spider-Man and the stuff I already liked. I already liked that stuff, but this was a little different. So in high school, I kind of faded from really being obsessed with comics, because I knew girls and I
Yeah.
partied, and I love rock and roll. So I was just a little more of that. But I still like comics, still like them. But I thought, when I would go back to them, I would sort of settle for them. Like, hey, this is good, this is all right. Like, okay, I read the X-Men. Oh, this is all right. But I could see it was for a younger audience who didn't have that much experience with earlier comics. I thought, this is for them, not for me. So anyway, I just kept going, and Heavy Metal magazine came out late '70s, and
Mhm.
Mobius was a big influence. Just the way he did science fiction was funny. I mean, he drew really well. I mean, extraordinarily well. That's why you first look at him. But when his stories about science fiction, he would just throw everything in there. In the 1940s, the 30s, the 60s, the future, everything, and it was all done with in a humorous tone that we liked. So when we started Love and Rockets, it that was there. I mean, you look at the very early Love and Rockets, and there's science fictiony, goofy science fiction stuff, because at the time we were still influenced by Mobius's way of doing science fiction, which we just really loved. And then we, started moving toward human beings, sort of.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, those early issues of Love and Rockets, I don't have a complete run of it, but I have quite a bit of the single issues. I obviously have those library collections that you guys. I mean, I probably have a lot of like sometimes triple, quadruple dripping or
Oh, right.
dipping, and some of the stuff. I have so many different versions of the books. But yeah, that's what I love is like is how different like you guys were, how experimental it was in those early days, and even sometimes I mean, like I know you venture out a little bit more than like Jaime does in terms of like working with other creators on stuff, working with Vertigo. I know you worked with Shelley Bond a few times. But I think that energy and like that you talk about music also being like a huge factor for, I mean, I know not just for you, but for your brothers too. How much of that was like a factor in terms of when you're drawing, like the
Mhm.
music? Like were you listening to music while drawing, or is drawing like something where you kind of need to have silence when you're doing it? Because I
Um,
know some people are different with that.
well, it started out briefly. I'll say it started out as we were little kids, right? And we would draw our own comics and we read comics, from the store. But the radio was on. This is the early '60s. So when 1964 came around, that's when American rock and roll just kind of exploded, just come boom. Because the English the Beatles came down, and so everybody was just doing something, and it just was really a rich period in the mid '60s for music. And we were reading comics and drawing them at the time, so that became like sort of part of the mix. The thing is, we liked the music, and we'd watch TV shows that were relatively authentic, like Shindig, but they would have the real bands on there and they'd perform. And so whenever they had a TV show and they had a rock band or rock music, it sounded dumb to me. It sounded like, this is fake. This is just some dumb version of real rock. And I found out later, somebody told me, oh, that's because they can't get the musical rights and all that stuff, so they just make up their own crappy music. Well, crappy it was. It's funny now to look at. You know, you watch these old crime shows and you see the rock band on it, and you're like, hey, but it's funny. It didn't get as even. It got funnier with punk, right? So okay, so we're listening to music, and it always bothered us that it wasn't portrayed as what rock really was, a whole different, you know, it's its own world. You know, when you're a young person, you go to your first rock shows or rock and roll, punk, whatever. There's some electricity there. There's some excitement, especially when you're seeing your favorite bands. You know, so by the time punk rolled around, I was still young enough to enjoy it. It was like they still don't get it right. And TV shows, it was Quincy and Chips and all these shows. I love that they called the fake punks Quincy punks, you know, back then. Because it was just, well, they're dressed up kind of realistically, but they just acted stupid. We go, this is not real. So Jaime, he just decided, I'm just going to do these stories using these girls at punk shows, but make it like kind of like what it's like to go. You know, I mean, they're still, you know, made up stories, but it was just getting closer to what young people were about, you know, at the time. And because, you know, like in comic books, if you had a punk in 1978 or 79 in a comic, they had a mohawk and a switchblade. No matter what, somehow punk rock had in comic books, they always had a switchblade and a mohawk. Well, first of all, you're not walking around with a switchblade and a mohawk in those days because the cops will know who you are. But anyway, so anyway, that was part of it, and music was always just the driving force, the energy. We just loved going to clubs and seeing bands and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so it was sort of in the mix. I didn't really do a lot of it till later, but Jaime was doing it so well, I didn't have to, because I would read stories and go, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember Joan Jett coming out of the whiskey throwing up. Yeah, I remember that. You know, that was the thing. You could tell so many stories in those at a punk show. And I don't know about now, because I haven't gone. But back then, man, you had 100 stories to tell when you came home.
Yeah, I mean, just from like what I've read through, you know, whether it's a biography from a musician like Anthony Kiedis of the Chili Peppers wrote a lot about that in his biography about like the punk scene. And like I can imagine it, but I'm like, man, I've never, like, there's nothing like that nowadays, you know, and like getting to see that like later, years later, and reading it in Love and Rockets, there's an authenticity to it that you don't see in other things, you know what I mean? Like the slice of life genre that you guys like just perfected, in my opinion, along with, you know, mixing in other things. It just feels real. All the characters, like you know them, you know what I mean? Like they're your friends almost, like you know them so intimately. And I think that's, for me, like that's what I love so much about your guys' stuff, and like watching the progression as like life, as you guys get older and stuff, and what your influences are continue to change, right? Like you're putting a little bit of that in it. I did want to ask, like, what, because originally you guys self-published, so what made you guys decide to do, I mean, like, I think it's after issue 1 though you get picked up, correct?
Yeah, well, what happened, it just, things just fell together. You know, it was like I was working at a mall, and I remember I was trying to do the first issue of Love and Rockets, just, you know, but that was before we knew it was Love and Rockets. And it took me 6 months to do, like, you know, 10 pages, because I was just, you know, a real job will mess you up if you're creative and you really want your energy to go there. If you got a regular job, man, it takes a lot out of you. So you work a lot slower, you do a little bit, you know, is what you can. I forget the question.
Oh, I was asking the reason you guys decided to do the self-publish.
Well, it was just that Jaime was doing his own comics for himself, you know, and I was doing mine. And Mario came over one day. He was already married with his family, and he just said, "Hey, I have a friend who has he can print a comic for us if we want to." And it was just to us. It was like, what, you know? And so we were thinking, okay, a fanzine. We'll just do a fanzine. It won't cost us much to get it printed, and it could be printed really nice because she worked in the print shop. So we got our pages together, and the thing is, Jaime didn't have a lot that he wanted to put out, so he started doing comics for this first issue. We didn't know what he was doing, so I just had this science fiction story that I was messing around with. I go, I'll just finish that. I'll just do that. So but what happened is that she was able to print a bunch of negatives, just the negatives for this comic, and I guess the the warden of the college said, no, we can't do that. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, we had the negative. So we actually went to different printers to print it, but they thought it was pornography because it was already pretty risque, you know.
Mhm.
And so we didn't know what to do. It was like, so we had to borrow like $700 from our little brother who, you know, because he had, I can't remember why he had money, but then we didn't. Anyway, we just borrowed it just to get it printed. You know, we paid him back, you know, and so we just had a fanzine. I'm like, okay, now what do we do? So we went to a couple of cons and showed it to people. And the best advice we could get was like, this looks good, but you need a color cover, right? We're like, how are we going to do that? And so we had no clue how to do something like that. So anyway, so you know, Heinz got his stuff, and me and Mario are looking at it like, where'd this come from? He could always draw, but this was special. This was something, and he was already doing the punk scene, and he was getting it accurate right away, even though there was science fiction in it, rocket ships and all that stuff. He had, you know, he just grabbed that world and just did it naturally, you know. And we were just couldn't believe how well it was drawn too. I think Jaime was a little surprised, and we made such a fuss, like, hey, you know, this is something, man. So we sent it up, and we didn't know what to do. So I sent a copy to the Comics Journal, which is published by Fantagraphics,
Right.
and they were known for their really biting reviews. They were pretty argumentative. You know, they were really, you know, I don't think that's a word, argumentative. Anyway, so but Gary Groth, publisher, he looked at it and goes, "We're thinking of publishing our own comics. Would you want to do it?" And at first, we're like, "No, this is too easy. This nah." And we just say, "Okay, okay, let's do it. Let's do it." And he said, "Well, add some more pages." Add. We're like, "Why?" And okay, because he wanted it to be this fancy magazine that wasn't like comic books, you know, at the time. This is
Mhm.
what 1981, you know. So we went along with it, and what that did for us, at least, was get us used to drawing a lot, to trying to get it out, because we were never disciplined. We would never get anything done in a long time, just because we didn't have a reason to really. So now we did. So we put that first issue out, and it got attention from the cover, Hyman's cover for the first issue of Rockets. And then, you know, after a while, we're all beat up and stuff, and so we do the second one. Well, Hyman did this really epic Maggie story in the jungle, dinosaurs, and spaceship, and all kind of revolution and civil war, all this stuff going on, and he put a lot of himself in it. I mean, you look at Lemon Rockets 2, his story of mechanics, and it's just amazing. And that changed the picture. That's when the mainstream companies were like, oh, okay, we need this guy. But see, in those days, there wasn't an indie scene, so it was like they could just tell anybody what to do, no matter how talented you were. They could tell you, uh, okay, we'll start you out inking Spider-Man. And
Mhm.
even then, I thought back then, I go, have you seen Hyman's story? Have you seen what he's done? That tears Spider-Man a new a-hole. You know, that is just so much going on in this, and you just wanted to ink. Yeah, you don't know the business. Blah 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 blah. Luckily, we were at the cusp of the new indie comics. So then indie comics started coming out, and you had strong talents like Peter Bagg and Dan Klaus and people like that. You know, that already were doing comics, but they didn't have a place that like Love and Rockets basically to get this stuff out. So anyway, it
Right.
became this army of wise guy cartoonists doing indie comics, and that lasted. That was great because it built a beachhead. You know, it built basically a road to a path. You didn't have to go to Marvel and DC. Uh, you'd be paid a little bit better at Marvel and DC, but just a little bit. I've worked with all the companies, but you know, but you did indie comics, your own comics, because you wanted to. You know, you just wanted to do it. You wanted to tell these stories. So anyway, once that happened, and we knew that, oh, there's people paying attention. That's when we started to, you know, roll with, you know, Lone Rocket start to move. But
Yeah,
it was
I
really,
think
I'm sorry, it was just
no,
really due to Jaime just expertise at telling a comic book story. You know,
I mean, I
so
think you guys just like came out so strong. Like looking back at that first issue and like that's your first published comic. I mean, it's insane, you know, how well the craft of it, you know. I think that I mean, I'm not the only one to think that or the only one to say that. I think it's just it is crazy to see you guys come out of the gate, boom, you know, issue one. Then you get picked up and like it's from there, it's like 40 years of you guys getting to do your stuff. Like I know you've like you said, you've branched out, you've worked with other companies, but you've always done Love and Rockets. Love and Rockets has always been a part of yours. And I do, that's what I love about the comic too, is that it's multiple stories. It's an anthology, but it's all of you guys, you know, and like you're always going back to characters, or maybe you'll see, you know, your stuff more in one issue than maybe Jaime's, and then the next issue it's more Jaime than you or Mario and stuff like that. It's such an exciting comic book, and I think that there's something in it for everybody, and I think that that's why it has sustained for such a long time. I wanted to ask too, like, was it kind of always your plan to do a series of stories with that many characters and that big of a cast, or did you kind of just, as you're writing it, you're kind of just like, in the beginning at least? I know now it's a little bit different because you've been doing it for a while.
Not so much. It's still kind of the same. Literally, it's an affliction. I just keep creating new characters for certain stories. Instead of using old ones for them, I'll just create new ones and create new ones. And then I go, oh, what am I going to do with these characters? Oh, I'll make them related. So all my characters are related somehow. But yeah, it's just a compulsion I have, is to keep creating characters. And I really do got to rein it in, you know. But that's because that's the easiest thing for me to come up with, is characters. That's the easiest thing, it shows. I mean, I just keep pouring them out. You know, I go, I got to back off. I got, you know, or just slow down a little bit and just stick to the characters I've got right now. Yeah. You know,
and like, you know, the because like Jaime's is like the Locust stories, yours is more the Palomar, and where that has evolved from in terms of the character. I mean, it's a generational book, obviously, for you and your characters. Do you ever plot out stuff, like, or think about like where will these characters end up, or is that also kind of something where you just like, you let the story almost grow organically? And
that's how it was for most of the time I'm doing Love and Rockets. In the middle there, I was mostly just rolling it out. You know, some characters are going to stay, some are going to go. I was reading it as I was writing it. You know what I mean? I was looking at it like that way. But now that there's a shorter time for Love and Rockets, I'm not saying that in a grim way. Just, you know, we're going to maybe do 10 more years of it, you know, and then see what happens. If, you know, if we still can do it, we're going for that. So there's certain stories, there's certain things I need to do to take care of now, and so I'm more focused on ending certain stories now. So I do have that planned out for the next 10 years, roughly. Not, I don't stick to too many plans that I make, like plots and things, is because you don't want to get stuck with the wrong one. You know, you just want to keep it open, and so when you get to it, you see if it still works. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm actually ending storylines I've been doing for years, just because it's time to finish them. You know, so that's a weird concept for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, like I said, 40 years is a long time to be doing it. You know, like, that is your book. Like, you don't see any other creators working on characters that long, you know, like from beginning to end. You know, like some other people will come in. I mean, I'm not saying the creations don't last, but you guys do your own thing. I kind of wanted to ask, you know, what is your personal favorite memory of the past 40 years of working on Love and Rockets?
I'm working on Love and Rockets. Simply that people liked it as much as they did. You know, we have a fan base that's really, really into what we're doing, or what, you know, the stories that they read, you know, when they were younger, I guess, you know. And having 40 years of it, we meet readers that are, you know, from different times of Love and Rockets, you know. And most of the readers nowadays weren't even born when it came out. So that might be you.
That's me. That's me.
Yeah. And that's cool, because then we made something that people can relate to, that weren't even around when we created it, you know. And that's cool. That just means we're doing something right. I mean, that shows us a little bit that we're doing something right, because young people can still look at it and go, oh, I get this, you know, I like this. And I'm like, all right, you know, that makes me the happiest, that people can just really just enjoy it as much as they do.
You know? Yeah, I think there's a timelessness to what you guys do and what you guys have done for the past 40 years. You know, I think that, I mean, my little brother he's 11 years younger than me, and he's reading Love and Rockets, you know? So like, he kind of helped me kind of get the jump. Like, I knew of the book, and like, I just, for whatever reason, like I never read, like I didn't have anybody exposing me to like indie stuff when I was a kid. Like I just read the superhero stuff. But because I turned my brother on to superhero comics when he was a kid, he kind of veered off into his own direction and eventually like got me into Love and Rockets. It's just kind of cool to have him get me into something when I was always the one doing it for him.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's, you like I said, it's the stories that are in there are so personal and so real, and I think that is why they will stand the test of time, and I think that's why it is easy for people to get into it no matter where they start. And that's what I love too, is like you can jump in any book, really, in my opinion, and get a full story and get the breadth of what makes the book so special. I like I said, like the 40 years, obviously you guys just put out the first 50, that nice
Oh yeah.
slipcase. I don't, I have it, it's at the shop where I work at a shop, so it's sitting there waiting for me. I'm making little small payments so I don't have to drop all that at once, but it is a beautiful book. I did open it and kind of flip through it. What was that like? How involved were you guys in terms of getting that put together? And I know there's an entire book where it's just like interviews and articles and stuff over
Mhm.
that period of time.
It was we actually had very little to do with it. It was the Fantagraphics that it was right. It was because they had done the complete eight ball. They did the complete hate. So they figured now it's time for Love and Rockets. It was just the timing, it was right, and they just felt, because that was what's something about Fantagraphics. It's really cool is that they'll just keep reprinting our stuff in different formats, and they will sell. That's what gets me. Like, wow, they don't. People already have the reprints of these books, but a different version. Like, and I've seen the book. What impressed me the most was just how well it's printed. I mean, I'm talking about the comics. The rest of it, not so much, but the comics itself are printed really nice. And we didn't even go back and fix things. There was plenty to fix, plenty to fix. A lot of typos, a lot of words missing. Just the way an arm is angled and wrong, and it always bothered me. Oh, I wish I drew it different. We could have gone back to do all that stuff, but we didn't, because we didn't want to even look at it. We wanted it to be the same comic that we made, for the readers collecting. Whoever's collecting this, you're going to get the comics as they were made. Well, how we did them. I don't know if that's good or bad, because, like for example, Gary Groff, the publisher, he goes, some of the coloring on these covers isn't so great, or didn't come out so great. Do you want us to recolor them? And like a fool, I said, no, just keep it like how they were on the stands. Well, I look at it now going, should have had it recolored, but it's okay. As long as it's the same comic that people read back in the 80s, 90s, in the aughts, you know. So anyway, so no, we didn't really have that much to do with it other than, okay, interviews, you know.
Mhm.
It's weird, huh?
I mean, yeah, I think it's Fantagraphics. That is what I love about that publisher. When I went out to Washington for the first time and I went to Seattle, that was like on my itinerary. I had to go to the Fantagraphics store. Like that was, and I even got like some stuff for you guys like that you can't even get online, like old
Oh.
versions of stuff that I scooped up. Yeah, I think as long as they keep it in print, people will keep buying it for
Yeah,
sure.
cool. That's really fortunate for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the current volume. I know you guys, it's not, it's I think it's almost like every 3 months. I feel like, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I feel like the past few issues have been every 3 to 4 months. I'm probably completely wrong with that.
Well,
But what in terms of like scheduling, because it's not just one person doing the book, it's both of you guys, are you guys bouncing ideas off of each other, like in terms of what you want to do and deciding like who's going to have maybe a couple more stories than the other one, or like how does that work when you guys are putting together a new issue?
well, for years, Love and Rockets has just been split down the middle. We don't change the who has more stories, who has. It's We don't really collaborate. We used to collaborate in the sense that we would, for gags, like say, we would work on a cover together, or we would work, like he'd be doing a story and he'd have a blank panel, and I'd come over his house and go, let me fill that panel. Of course, he wanted that panel, he needed it, but I would, I'm his older brother, so of course I bullied him, I'm gonna draw, you know. So that it's not, we just go by how we can do it. It usually takes about 3 months to do a comic completely, but sometimes whatever is going on, in our regular lives, sometimes it slows us down, whatever we have to be doing. So right now I'm a little behind. Jaime's already done with the next issue, but I'm behind. But I'm getting there. I'm getting a lot closer to the deadlines. So I'm saying it takes about 3 months to do a comic.
Okay. And do you guys have like, because this is the fourth volume of Love and Rockets. So
Mhm.
do you guys, is this going to be, or have you guys decided like this will be the final volume, or do you think that you'd ever stop it and relaunch it again?
I considering where we are now, in our lives and time, we will probably keep it the magazine till it ends, and that'll be like, oh, that's how it started, and that's how it'll end, something like that,
Okay.
But yeah, this is not likely because we stopped doing the annual because it was just too labor intensive. It just wiped us out because we're not the type to do 50 pages over the year and and just spread it out and keep it at home. We like to finish stories and get it out because that's how we read comics growing up. You went to the store and got your comics. So if we have a comic that comes out once a year, that's fine because what I liked about it, the annual, the big thick book, was that there was more room to tell a story. I could finish a story in one issue, which was great.
Mhm.
Because it changes once you start serializing, like in Love and Rockets now, you start adding more, because going, oh, I could do this, I could do. But in the other, in the book, the annual, uh, I was more disciplined. Like, okay, I'm going to finish this story in this book, so I don't have to worry about continuity next issue. So anyway, yeah, we do it as we do it.
Okay. And then like we talked about, like you've done work outside of Love and Rockets. You've worked with other publishers. How were those experiences? How do they differ from this? Obviously, I mean, I know the obvious parts of why they differ, but how is it working with somebody else when you're used to like doing everything yourself?
Yeah, I had to learn. I had to learn that. I think Jaime is a little much more impatient with that, so he doesn't do a lot of almost never does other comics for people, you know. But I did it. Well, I just really it was for work. It was for extra work, and that's why I did it. But it was a little weird at first because I was drawing. My first real job like that was Yeah. It was written by Peter Bagg,
Mhm.
and it was about an all-girl rock band, and it's supposed to be for kids. And the work pace, the pace that you have to get out a monthly comic was just grueling, man. That just wiped me out. And then I'd have to go to Love and Rockets and draw. So it was a learning experience. All the tough stuff I had to do and with other comics, just taught me how to get the stuff out. That's why I'm able to do extra comics while I'm doing Love and Rockets because I can I'm just used to doing it. And I worked with Shelley Bond for a long time, and we became kind of close as far as what we were doing and what we're going to do. But you still have to listen. You still have to say this. You got to listen to corrections. You got to listen to opinions. And some editors aren't even there. They don't even know. Oh, did you send in the art? Yeah. What'd you think? Oh yeah. I'll find it. You get those editors, and but Shelley was really hands on. She really wanted, whenever she would come up with a project with me, she really wanted it to be the big book of the time. Well,
Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorite people in
mhm,
comics. I just love everything she does. She was like one of the first editors I followed
mhm,
when I started paying attention to like all the credits in the book instead of just who wrote and drew the book.
mhm.
So yeah, I just love everything she does. I love everything she's been doing too as well the past few years. I wanted to ask what other projects are you currently working on? I know you, besides Love and Rockets, you do like Blubber, you do psychodrama as
Mhm.
well. Is there anything else you're working on?
Not in comics. I'll do stuff like album covers, or I just did the can't remember what they're called. Surf Curse. I did their album cover a couple of years ago, and then there's things like that. I'll do it once in a while. Then I did this woman starting a clothing line, and I just drew a bunch of models, like a lot of young people wearing hoodies. And anyway, that's all I can talk about right now because it's a big project. And uh, but that's only the side stuff I'm doing right now. I don't do any side stuff anymore. Just well, I'm retired as far as that goes. It's
Yeah.
I'm doing Love and Rockets, and I do Psychodrama Illustrated and Blubber, whenever I can. And even those have endings. Like Blubber's going to probably just be 10 issues, and then I'll stop doing it. It's just that I don't want to stop doing a comic like that because I really have the urge to get really squirrely and nasty once in a while, and I don't want to put my regular stuff. So, or you know, so anyway, and then Psychodrama Illustrated, I like it because it's the darker Love and Rockets. You know,
Mhm.
it has a lot more freedom to be dark and dirty. You know, if I choose. You know, but that's it really. Like I said, I'm retired from. I'm working for a living.
Okay.
Hopefully, hopefully.
A couple years ago, when we did a written interview, you mentioned you and Jaime doing a color 80-page superhero comic.
Right. No, that's just a pet project that I still want to do, and I want to find time to do it. You know, I got to catch up on my regular work and put out an 80-page giant superhero comic. Hyman's game, you know, and I said, yeah, we'll have a one-color superhero comic to get it out of our system. See if we can do it. But I've noticed that I guess so much time has passed because I noticed it's harder to do something like that when it used to be just easy, you know, fluff. You just draw a superhero, he's flying, he beats up stuff, people, and stuff blows up. But you can't really do that anymore. You kind of have to have uh, just that idea used to get fly back in the early days. But now it's like you got to have something to read. You got to have something because you're in because when you do a superhero comic, you're in competition with a lot of stuff. Love and Rockets doesn't have a lot of competition, but superheroes do. So we'll do it. It'll disappear and then become a classic in 10 years or something. No, who knows? Who knows? It's just doing for fun. And I just like retro superheroes,
Yeah, I definitely want to see that book with you guys. I think that would be a fucking awesome project.
I hope it happens, and I hope I don't take too long to get to it.
Okay. So I want to talk about too, like you guys just did the documentary with PBS, which I mean, just blew my mind that they were doing a documentary with you guys. I think it's awesome, long overdue. What was that experience like doing that?
It was a little nerve-wracking because we want the right information to come out, but luckily they were very meticulous in all the detail of what they wanted. They wanted our past, our parents, and how we grew up, the comics we read. They wanted everything, and we were okay with it. But we were constantly being questioned, and this and that. And so the day we filmed, we got shot. We shot. We were kind of out of it. We weren't at our best. So that's why we're kind of mumbling and kind of that. Oh, that there was a lot of that, and they edited it out. Luckily, because it was early in the morning, and we were just spent because we had been doing interviews, and that day we just were out. But these guys were so good putting it together. They edited a lot of the stuff really good. There's only a couple of mistakes here and there, but I thought it turned out really well.
Yeah, I think it's really glad that it exists. I think it's awesome that they decided to cover you guys and do a whole documentary on it. I mean, you kind of been talking about it in terms of like how you're producing the content. It takes about three months to do an issue. But what is your like day to day? Like, what is your daily routine? Are you drawing every day? Do you kind of how's that discipline now as opposed to what it was, years ago?
Well, I learned a long time ago in the 90s. I just learned that, it's what's typical for us, especially indie comic book artists, is that you just stall a lot. You just don't sit down and draw because you have the freedom to leave.
Mhm.
Whereas a mainstream comic, you got to be there because it's not going to get done, and you got a deadline if you want to get paid. Blah blah blah. It's that easy. But an indie comic is, well, I don't feel like drawing, and there's that thing of like I just know so many people who just don't want to do it. And I just did a flip on it. I don't know what inspired me, but I did a flip on that. I go, wait a minute, but doing comics is the good thing. Why am I avoiding the good thing? So I trained myself. It took me a while to do the comics as the good thing. This is the good thing. Loafing is not good. You can loaf, but getting the work done, when best you can, at least part of the day. Some people just take off weeks, and don't draw or write. And so anyway, it evolved into me working 7 days a week now. But a couple of days or a day or two, I'll didn't I just say that? I'll take a day off because we have to go do something. We have to go do some business or something like that, and then we'll just take the rest of the day off or whatever. And that works for me because I can't help but leave. But if I'm home, I can't just sit around watching TV. I got to, or I got to draw. So not every day is a full work day. 5 days a week normally is, but like a couple of days, like the weekends or so, it's just a little bit of work. But I have to draw. And I learned this from saw a documentary. I think it was John Buscema, the old Marvel artist, who was a superstar in the '70s. Saw an interview and he goes, "I got to draw every day. I got to sit. I got to draw, even if it's not finishing a page or anything, because he has to draw. He just can't stop." And that's what I've become. I have to draw every day, unless I can't help it, like I'm out of the house or whatever doing something. But yeah, so it's basically 5 days a week with hard labor, but I enjoy it. It's just my body's starting to complain. I'm just gotta go to chiropractor and stuff. But yeah, but other than that, yeah, it's an obsession.
Yeah, I mean, I don't draw, but I mean, I'm obsessed with comics too. So I mean, if I could draw, I know I'd be drawing every single day as well. So what I know your daughter is also producing her own comics, Natalia. I've done an interview with her a couple of years back. I had her on my channel. What kind of advice? Because I was going to ask, what advice would you give to up and coming cartoonists? But you have an up and coming cartoonist that's your daughter. So like, what kind of advice, or does she come to you for advice? And what would you say to her?
A lot of times it's just technical advice, like she's not getting the right proportions on a page that she needs for whatever project she's doing. And then I'll just say, "Oh, try this, try that," and just little stuff like that usually, because if you look at her work, it's nothing like mine. And that really impresses me, that she's got her own mind right away. And knowing that, I just try to encourage her and other young cartoonists, just try to do what you believe in. Believe in the comics you're making, believe in yourself, but mostly what you're putting down, believe in it. Like, this is you, this is your diary, but it's drawn, and it could be as fantastic and wacky as you want. But as long as it's yours, you have a place. That you're just not doing what other people are doing. So many poor guys in the old days, making comic books in the '40s and '50s, and they had to adapt to doing comics, and they never did their personal comics. I met some of those old guys that used to do those, and they were very envious of living off. It's like, "You can do your own thing." I go, "Yeah, but you guys got paid." And they go, "Yeah, $40 a page." I mean, it was lousy,
Yeah.
And some people, and this goes for any kind of thing like this, where some people would just jump on that, that opportunity. Like, okay, they told me to draw, Axeman and this comic and he'll start to draw, and then he'll start developing character into it. And that's what happened to like Plastic Man and comics like that, and Captain Marvel, those early comics, is because the guys were into doing it. Even though it's a superhero and it belonged to the company, they created names for themselves because they were into doing it. Same with Jack Kirby, so they believed in themselves to a degree, just to a degree. Because some guys who were just terrific writers, and a guy named John Stanley used to write Little Lulu and little kid comics, and then horror comics and stuff. He's probably my favorite writer in mainstream comics. But after it was over, he was like, "Fuck this thing, screw this. Fuck you guys, This guy didn't get paid well and didn't get credit, and but his comics are readable. You read a Little Lulu comic or story, and it's good, So that's unfortunate, that those old guys, but yeah, some Batman artist, he was like, I'm talking like old Batman, like '40s and creaky art, and this and that. And he just said, "Oh, I love it." And it's usually because of the girls. They love the girls. They love the females in our comic. And so, anyway, I don't even remember the question. I get so involved.
It was advice. Like for cartoonists and stuff.
Yeah. Ended up talking about me, of course.
That's why you're here.
Just no, really, just to believe in yourself. It's worth doing. You're going to feel lousy if you don't do it. You think you feel lousy doing it, you're going to feel 1,000 times worse not doing it. I know so many people are like, "Oh man, I wasted my time. I didn't do anything." I know, that's why I work 7 days a week. I don't want to miss any time doing this. So she's, she hasn't gotten that rhythm yet, but I encourage her, just keep doing it. And even if you don't do it for a living, just draw for yourself then, because that's something that really, your soul really comes out, and you want that kind of expression. And that's what's great about indie comics, is so many people are just expressing themselves, doing what they believe in and what they, even if they're minor stories like, oh, I drank coffee this day, got new shoes. That could be an entertaining comic. I've read a few.
Yeah, I definitely love, I mean, the indie comic scene is my favorite part of comics. I love superhero comics still, like I still read them,
Mhm.
but I would be very, very sad if the indie comic scene did not exist as it does today. I think there's so many different types of stories. I talk about it all the time with some of my guest hosts, and when we talk comics, that there is a comic for everyone. There really is. You can find a comic book for every kind of reader, any kind of fan. And I mean, it's the best medium. I love TV, film, music, all that stuff, but you make me choose, and comics is going to be it 10 times out of 10.
You're gonna get to the point, man. You're gonna get, yeah.
Yeah. So before we wrap it up, I just was kind of curious. We talked about it earlier about like influences and stuff. Is there anything that you're currently like, reading that you've been digging? Any recommendations or any current influences that you kind of pull from?
At the moment, I'm not aware of them because you're always being, influenced by something, And right now, since I'm so busy just trying to finish these couple of comics, I don't really have. I can, I'll probably when I'm dropping off to sleep tonight, I'll think of something. But right now, I can't really think of anything that's triggering a creative burst. Of course, like I said, once we hang up, I'm sure I'll think of something. But right now, nothing. Just looking at my own work, saying, okay, this has got to go here. I got to get to this point. So that's where that is. I guess my inspiration now is finishing. That's always been my goal, even as a little kid. I wanted to finish a comic because I never did. So many people just drew parts of comics and just forgot about it, got bored or whatever. I I believe in finishing a comic and not taking too long to finish it.
Okay. And so I just want to again say thank you so much for doing this. It's been a blast talking comics with you. Before we get out of here, I'll drop all the links to where people can find you online. I don't need you to give me all the links and stuff. I'll tell everyone. But is there any upcoming appearances? I know you guys did a Golden Apple signing. I was working that day, so I did get to go out there. But is there any conventions that you guys are planning on doing this year, or any, I know you guys are doing like the Cartoonist Fest, I think that was kind of in Long Beach, I believe, a few years back, but any plans?
We're going to boy, I don't even know the month right now because I've had to cancel a couple of things just because things are kind of busy right now. But one of them is to I guess the Billy Ireland Museum is out there.
Cool.
And I think Natalia and I are going to do a talk. I can't remember I guess it's in April, March, probably. I'm terrible. I don't have a calendar in front. And then we're going to be heading out to England, going to a con, just because I haven't been there since 1986. So I figure, and then we have a really strong following there. They're really cool over there about comics. So, well, just that, but that's the only plans. And then Comic Con every year. It's just a tradition, even though it's kind of a drag. It's still what we do. So
Right
nothing real plan. I think Jaime has more plans because he's hooked up with Katie Skelly, and they're always doing something. They're always going somewhere. So we'll see.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you guys together soon, hopefully somewhere in the LA area. I love everything you guys do. Again, I can't say enough praise about you and Love and Rockets. I love everything you guys have done. Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure. I will share all the links to where people can find you online. I'll share the links where you guys can pick up Love and Rockets if you haven't already done so. And I would love to do this with you again sometime in the future if you're up for it.
Okay. Cool. This is very good. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me.